Hello the internet, my name's Laura and welcome to my channel where I help teach you about the mental challenges of being a writer. If you haven't been here before, I welcome you, and if you have been here before, I'm so glad that you can spend some time with me today. Today we are going to be talking about a very important subject: how to know if your writing sucks. I just want to start this by saying that most writers are going to write bad stuff sometimes. It might be even a lot. Some people's writing is more clean when it comes out. Some people's writing is more messy when it comes out, and then has to be edited down to something. However, we are going to deal today with what you do if your writing sucks. So we're going to start out with, does your writing suck? If no, that's great. But if yes, then we're going to talk a little bit about that. So, your writing sucks. Who says? There is an important difference between, is there some feedback that you've gotten from somebody that says your writing sucks, and whether or not you reread something recently and you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, this sucks. So if somebody else has read your writing and they have said that it sucks, the first thing that you want to look at is the same thing that I was saying in my advice video, which is, why do they have any right to tell you that it sucks? And how much credit are you going to give them? I feel like most professional writers or people who are putting effort into writing are not going to come back to you and tell you that your writing sucks. Mostly because they know what it's like to be a writer. And that's just like, yeah, that generally. Now, we're not talking about if somebody specifically says the word sucks, right? But in general, if that's what you feel like they have said. So the first thing you're going to do is be like, okay, who is this person who has read my stuff and they said it sucks? Do they have any right to tell me that? Is there any reason why I need to believe that? Is there any reason why I need to internalize that? And you're either going to say yes or no to this. Most of the time, if somebody tells you that your writing sucks, they're not somebody that you need to listen to, right? If they are someone who you should be listening to and they tell you that your work sucks, that's odd, but we'll move down to the next point. But first we're going to talk about what happens if you think that your writing sucks. I feel like this one comes up more often. Most of the time when I have heard people talk about their own writing sucks, it's because they think that their writing sucks. So this is you having reread something that you've written and saying that it sucks. So number one, if there is a reason for you to think that your writing sucks, whether you're the one saying it or somebody else is saying it, you need to then ask yourself the question, am I being emotional about this? The answer is yes. The answer is not no. Because the language immediately, when you say that something sucks, right? When you say that the whole thing sucks, there's no objectivity there, right? This is an emotional outburst of, for whatever reason, whatever emotions you're feeling right now, whether it's receiving some feedback that was not as glowing as you would have liked, or you're reading it and you're comparing yourself to somebody else, or you're reading it and you're like, this is just bad, like this is an emotional response, right? And so if you really think that your writing sucks, you need to take a step back and center yourself. Because if you're saying that it sucks, what you're doing is you're focusing on whatever is wrong with it. And remember, everybody writes something that is not ideal all the time, right? This is what a draft is, this is what writing is, this is why we edit. Not everything is going to be perfect all the time. And by just declaring that it sucks, you are not focusing on how it can be fixed. What you're basically saying is this work is not the ideal that I have in my head, right? And like I said, duh. But most issues can be fixed, right? Basically what is happening is you have identified that your piece needs to be edited. Good job. The next thing you want to consider is, do you need to address this problem right now? Wherever you are in your writing, like, if you're still working through the story and you're not to the end yet, you probably don't necessarily need to worry about, like if the writing's a little messy, or if there's a couple of plot holes yet, if you don't know where your narrative is going, right? So if, yes, you're going to deal with this issue now, then you're going to grow into the problem, you're going to go into it, try and figure out what about it feels incorrect. I'm not saying that you're necessarily going to know what the problem is right now, but as with most problems, it feels kind of off. This is you developing your writer's intuition, right? Something here feels off. That's why I thought that it sucked. So you're going to need to be an explorer, you're going to need to experiment, and you're going to need to go, I think that this is the problem. I think that my character's motivation is trash and I need to fix that. But it's basically going to be something where it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. This is your writer's intuition telling you that something isn't right. Now, the other option is that no, you're not going to worry about this right now. Because you've still got more story to write, you still have more the character development going on, you've still got more plot ideas that need to happen, and all that kind of stuff. There's also the possibility that you know that something is ridiculously broken, and you just continue on with the story anyway. You pretend that the problem is fixed. You say, whatever the problem is, like, this character's motivation is perfect. And then you just start writing as if their motivation is perfect. Not every time you find a problem in your story do you need to stop and fix it at that exact time. Now, of course, this is with the caveat that at some point you are going to have to fix it, and there are issues where not knowing that thing at that time means you really can't progress well with your story. There definitely have been times when I've had to stop because I'm like, okay, like, I so don't understand what this character's motivation is that I can't even write the next scene because, right, this is another part of your writer's intuition. There's a lot of writer's intuition in this one, where you need to figure out, yes, I can continue on without this, or no, I can't. Part of deciding whether or not you can continue or not continue without fixing it is drilling down into the problem. I put the "is this problem worth figuring out right now" question first, because you really should be asking yourself that first. And as your writer's intuition develops, you'll get a feel for whether or not you can just continue without fixing it. There's a strong desire among a lot of writers that you need to fix it as you go, and that is absolutely not true. One of the most freeing things that I ever did was learn that I can do brackets. If this is something you do, I mean, you can also use parentheses or whatever. It doesn't necessarily matter which actual, thing you use. But you basically, you're like writing along, and you're like, I don't know how they're going to escape from this. And so I put inside my little brackets, they escape. and that's it, right? And I keep going. And then I come back later on and I'm like, okay, let's figure out how they escape. Because sometimes your story doesn't need to know at that exact moment how they escape, just the fact that they have escaped. I literally had one scene in a book that I wrote. It was actually Law of the Prince Charming. It's the one book that I have published up on Wattpad, where there's one scene in that book where I did not complete that scene until after the book was finished. Like, I knew who was in that scene, I knew where that scene was happening, I knew what the characters were doing when they came into the scene, and their, like, emotional state, and where their emotional state and what had happened afterward. But, like, the actual content of that scene and, like, where the conversation went and all that, like, I rewrote that scene, like, so many times, but like I said, I didn't finish it until after I had finished the book, because that was when I finally got some motivations down enough that I could write that scene. Be aware that you can just leave stuff, and you can just leave stuff undone, and you can leave stuff ugly. You can leave stuff ugly. You can leave scenes. You can leave some motivations. You can leave details for sure. And basically you just need enough knowledge of what has happened in order to keep going with the story. If you run into a place where you cannot progress without knowing, then you'll obviously have to stop and fix it. Now we're going to get very specifically into trying to figure out what needs to be fixed. So we've got logistics. So that is issues with word choice, word flow, spelling, grammar, people sounding like people, people sounding like themselves, like saying things that are in character or out of character. And we've also got narrative, which is probably the bigger thing, but narrative is obviously the story, where it's going, the plot, character motivations, plot holes, that kind of thing. More often than not, logistics are the types of things that you can put off for longer. And then narrative issues, especially plot and character motivations, you may or may not have to address at that exact time. At this point, it's just a matter of finding where the story feels wrong, using your writer's intuition, and once you've figured out what it is, trying to narrow it down to what specifically it is. And then you can go in and either try some different things, like if your character's having trouble with motivation, or you're having trouble with your character's motivation, ask them a whole bunch of questions, and maybe you'll be able to figure that out. Write some scenes in the background with them, that, like, scenes that are not part of the story, that are just trying to figure out what's going on in their head. This is also a time when you go online and look up character motivation problems, and, like, there are articles, right? There's articles all over the place that will help you, try and diagnose these problems. And these are all things that are going to be developing your writer's intuition. You're going to start noticing, when I think this sucks, when this part is triggering my writer's intuition, it's very often because of X. And then you learn how to deal with that, and then other problems pop up, right? This is, again, a situation that's just going to go on and on. As I said at the beginning, everybody writes crap sometimes. Everybody writes things that suck. And then we figure out what the problem is, we edit it, and we go. I am going to say that, for the most part, all problems can be fixed one way or another. Some problems are going to require more fixing than others. If your character's motivation has completely gotten away from you and you've written all these things, and then you go back and find out that they never wanted to be a knight, they wanted to be a baker, that's probably going to change your entire story. There are ways to fix that, for sure. And the amount of time that it might take to fix that story might not be worth it. There is a possibility that a story can have enough problems that you need to set it aside. Either you don't have the skills yet to fix it, or the skill that it would take, or the amount of time it would take to fix the problem is not worth it. I know there's a time when Brandon Sanderson told us about, he was writing this book that was about, the book was about a group that goes into apocalyptic situations, like, I think probably a bunch of different worlds, but they go into apocalyptic situations, and they and then they, like, solve the apocalyptic situations or something like that. That was the basic premise of the book, and the story was following this new girl who was an intern for this organization. And he wrote the book, and he wrote a majority of the book, from what I understand, and then realized that there was a problem. And he sat down with his friends, and they dug into it, and he realized that the problems that existed with that story were such that he could write another book completely in the amount of time it would take to go back and untangle the entire, the issues with the apocalyptic book. This is not a situation that I've ever been in, and Brandon Sanderson is a lot more along his journey of writer's intuition than I am, and probably you are. So I'm not saying that more than likely the problems that you have with your book are fixable. I don't want you to think that there's never a time when you take a book and you just take the whole thing and you put it into your trunk. Remember, don't ever delete any of your writing that doesn't work. You take it and you put it in the trunk. But that is also a possibility. Most of the time, however, you are going to be drilling down in on that, looking up what you think the problem is, and then writing, rewriting, editing until it feels right, until your writer's intuition tells you, I have fixed that sufficiently. The more you do that, the more you've trained your writer's intuition, the faster you're going to get through little problems. Then you're going to start running into the bigger problems. But it's the same process each time, right? You think that your book sucks. Take a step back. Make sure you're not being overly emotional about it. And then start narrowing in on what the problem actually is. You might not get it the first time, but you will get it. You'll figure out what the problem is, and you'll be able to fix it. And then you can continue on with writing your book and finishing your book. Hopefully that will be a helpful guide for you. And if you like this video, go ahead and like this video. If you'd like more videos helping you learn to become a successful writer, go ahead and subscribe, and you'll see those when those come out. And I will see you guys in the next video. All right, bye-bye.